Welcome back. Well, more than 25,000 gallons of that oil spilled in EXUMA has been cleaned up or removed. And we're going to discuss this quick turnaround with Captain Glenn Bain, who is very experienced in the maritime industry and all things related. Good evening to you, Captain Bain. If you can just give the audience just a little bit an idea of your experience to be able to qualify you to speak to this.
Good evening, Shanique, and good evening to the Bahamas. My experience comes all the way back from the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. We would have had emergency situations where we, on board our ships, had to do drills and prepare for that type of thing. I went to the port department where I became a small boat inspector. In fact, I was in charge of the small boat inspection at the port department as the deputy port controller. Mm-hmm. After that, I went private with 2 container ships. And going private with those ships meant that, I was a ship manager and a relief captain. So when those ships are undergoing surveys and inspection, port state inspection and all the rest, I would always be called on to go and address whatever comes out of it. Following that, for 3 years, I was with the Bahamas Maritime Authority as a port state inspector for the Bahamas, where I inspected cruise ships and tankers, and with these type of emergency matters.
So
right?
Oil spills are nothing new to you?
Oil spills are nothing. Casualties, shipping casualties. When there was the incident with the Sea Hall and the United Star, I was the person called upon to do the initial investigation and did an inquiry to find out what went wrong. No, oil spills in particular, we don't have too many oil spills in the Bahamas that I ever had anything to do with. But the procedures for ships to ensure that oil spill, the ability to have an oil spill is minimized to the extent where you have procedures and measures in place to address it. I would be fully cognizant of. When I was training to become a port state inspector, I worked for the U.S. Coast Guard along with them for 6 months with their team doing this type of follow-up and going on board the various types of ships, particularly dealing with emergency matters. Mm-hmm. So casualties like this, it's a follow-up situation. I think that's what the investigations are all about.
Right.
But my expertise comes from the perspective of the ship actually being involved in a spill.
So this spill, which I learned, and I'm learning the difference, is not the crude oil. We'll get to that in a moment.
Right.
But this is refined oil.
They call it non-persistent oil, yeah.
What is it?
Non-persistent.
Non-persistent oil.
Yeah.
And so is this something that, and thankfully it's being cleaned up, over 25,000 gallons have been removed already or cleaned up already, so that's great. But is this something that would have easily been taken care of by Mother Nature as well, because it's not that very sludgy, thick, hard
It's
oil?
not abrasive. It would have been cleaned up in any event. If you can take some of it out of the sea, it helps. But actually, looking at all of what I've seen surrounding this particular incident, it happened in a cove. Mm-hmm. And it's for that reason.
So that was good too?
Well, it was good in a way, because if it happened in open sea, it would spread out more, become thinner, and the sun would be able to evaporate it better.
Oh, okay. So you're saying...
Yeah, the sun evaporates it once it gets, because it floats on the sea, mm-hmm. because it's lighter than seawater. It floats on the sea, and the sun kind of dries it up.
So the next question and the follow-up is, let's talk about the difference between this non-persistent oil and, say, crude oil, for example, when there's an oil spill.
Yeah, it's a huge difference. Crude oil, first of all, doesn't float as readily and spread out at the top.
Yeah, keep talking.
And whatever crude oil touches, it contaminates with the oil. It covers things. It takes over. Mm-hmm. Whether it be the sand on the shoreline, whether it be animals that it comes into contact with. But the non-persistent oil, like diesel, and I understand this was diesel, mm-hmm. The most you get of it is paint. You can see a trace, a sheen on whatever touches ashore.
Right. So then the biggest damage with this type of oil spill is what it would do then to the shoreline.
To the shoreline, yeah. Because in the sea, it's going to just float to the top and dry up.
So you don't want it getting there to the shoreline. That's the thing.
If you can stop it from getting to the shoreline, it'll be good. And even after it gets on the shoreline, the kind of impact it would have as compared to crude oil is negligible.
Okay, well, listen, let's talk about this crude oil and the issues that's happening in Grand Bahama, which I'm sure you've been following up on from a distance and paying attention to, right? While the government is attempting to get a handle on the oil spill that happened in EXUMA, there's concern and frustration stemming from that massive oil spill over in Grand Bahama during Hurricane Dorian, and it's still brewing. Some 3 years after the massive oil spill in East Grand Bahama, a businessman is telling Eyewitness News that the oil has yet to be fully remediated. Theo Seeley traveled to Grand Bahama last year for an
75 million gallons of oil. Equinor's oil facility in East Grand Bahama in 2019. It's now 2022. And Andrew Gator, a businessman who made a living from mining rock aggregate that was destroyed as a result of that oil spill, says oil residue still remains and his business has yet to reopen.
Why do you suppose that this is dragging on that?
Well, first of all, it was a big volume of oil that actually got spilled all over the place, and it was a lot of crude oil.
When Eyewitness News visited the site in 2021, I saw for myself that oil residue remained on large portions of land which was used for rock aggregate collection. New video footage taken by Gator today shows that there still seems to be oil residue there. He's disappointed that the Minutes administration didn't hold Equinor's feet to the fire to clean up the spill in its entirety.
All of that is the oil up there?
That's oil, right. But if diesel had stood on that rock right now,
Oh, it would have been dry out. Yeah, you wouldn't see anything.
It's like a pig thing.
Yeah, that's thick and grimy, and anything it touches, it just envelopes. Yeah.
Now, as far as the Davis Cooper administration is concerned, Eyewitness News asked Press Secretary Clint Watson at a press briefing a few months ago if government was pleased with the Equinor spill cleanup efforts in East Grand Bahama. Watson asserted the government was satisfied with what had been done to remediate the site.
They might be satisfied based on what they were told, but I don't think they'll be satisfied because out people on this entire site and see how what's going on.
Outside of being a business owner who's been affected by this oil spill, as a Grand Bahamian, how does it make you feel to know that this international company that was operating on your home turf, has basically, according to you, not done a good job with cleaning up a mess that was made?
Me personally, I don't think the oil company really respect the humans. The way they go about things, they totally disrespect the humans. And the government really needs to look into the situation and try to get all of this problem resolved.
Now, a business owner who was affected by that multi-million-gallon oil spill took Equinor to court. There were two matters brought to the court. In the first case, the court awarded the business owner some $1.1 million. As for the second case, the court has handed down an injunction to freeze the company's assets up to $11.2 million, and the land has also been frozen, which means the company cannot sell it either. If you check Equinor's website, it made a promise to fully remediate all oil spilled in East Grand Bahama, but Gator says that has yet to materialize. Theo Seeley, Eyewitness News.
So, Captain Bain, there is that crude oil that we referred to a little bit ago. Why is it taking so long, you suppose, for that Grand Bahama issue to be remedied?
Yeah, in my view, Equinor spill, as you are aware, came from Hurricane Dorian. Equinor's spill was not an accident because of any negligence. Equinor's spill happened, it's what we call force majeure. There's no regulations to deal with force majeure that I know of. All the regulations are whether you have a ship to shore or a facility causing a spill to happen, right? Now, this one was huge. There are two facilities in the Bahamas that really stocks up on crude oil, Equinor and Buckeye. Buckeye is about 3 to 4 times in volume their time farm. Of course, that hurricane never reached to Freeport where Buckeye is. And we really got to thank our lucky stars it didn't, right? But as far as clean up from oil spill ashore, you imagine what happened here now. The wind blew the tops of those tanks and took the fuel and spilled it all over outside of Equinor's facility. This is not spilled inside Equinor's facility. And that would not happen any other means. It's force majeure, it's nothing, and I'm not trying to make excuses for Equinor.
I'm happy
Right?
that you're kind of just laying it out evenly, that we have a better appreciation of truly what took place in Grand Bahama and still exists to this day.
Yeah, well, again, it's crude oil. So it kind of, it's very abrasive and it sticks and takes over whatever it covers.
And destructive to the
And
environment.
it also sinks.
Ah.
So there is ongoing, and they've done, I mean, based on what I know, because I've been out there a few times, they've done an enormous amount of work trying to clear, but the spill is so massive because the storm was so massive. And again, all of the cleanup that they're doing to address Grand Bahama is on the outside of their facility. And they had no control over why it happened. They had no control over causing it not to happen. And if another hurricane comes to Freeport, to Grand Bahama, we got to hope again it's not that kind of strength that can take the tops off. Because maybe if you had a strength 2 or strength 3, those tops would not have come off. So it's in my view, it's no negligence to Equinor that this happened.
So it's no negligence, right? And you've been hearing just in this week with this oil spill that politicians, that environmentalists, everyone calling for stronger fines. Do you think Equinor should be made to pay more, even though it was an act of nature, even though they had no control over what took place? But just to pay more than what presently is on the books.
To be well, I mean, I don't even know what they paid. I don't know what they paid. I heard about the 1.1 million or whatever on the clip, and whether they should be made to pay. If, in my opinion, if the fuel impacted some Grand Bahamian or anybody in a way that it caused the loss outside of the hurricane, then of course you should have liability coverage to take care of that. And again, would you get liability coverage to take care of something that you don't foresee? Because again, they may have within their compound, they may have full liability coverage, but on other people's property. But liability is liability. So in cases like this, I'm not the expert on insurances. What I do know, though, is when you're talking about oil spills worldwide, they have a series of oil spill funds. The shipping community have funds so that if one of those ships spill oil, they go to the fund and the fund takes care of that matter. The terminals have certain sets of funds so that if they have a terminal spill, but again, I don't know if any of this kicks in when you have force majeure, just like everything else.
Right.
An act of nature. How does insurance cover acts of nature? If you don't have certain specific insurance for a hurricane and your house is impacted by a hurricane, you wouldn't have no coverage for that. And again, that's something you can foresee. So I don't have the answers for that one.
Yeah, I guess none of us do. Just sort of, putting it out there for consideration.
But I think we should all bear in mind that, this, if, for example, this was a facility spill based on operational means, and that spill got into the outside of that compound, and I would have a totally different view on this.
Right.
But there was nobody on that compound when this hurricane was doing what it was doing. They came back, and I mean, we got to look at the reality of things. Ever since that happened, this facility was not able to even receive one ship. So they had zero income, and they're spending all the time to try and get this facility up to speed again, where it could now start to receive ships. And I know because I went there on a few occasions, specifically to ensure that they could continue to operate from an audit perspective without receiving a ship. And when it will be time that they can now receive a ship because those measures and procedures are in place.
Right. Right. Well, that I tell you. So obviously, it's a long road ahead for them.
It's a long road
to
ahead.
get Grand Bahama, get that oil off the ground, out of the ground, and all that stuff.
It is such an unfortunate situation with Equinor.
Yeah.
But EXUMA is a different story.
Yeah, different story. And we're happy that EXUMA, it looks like it's, perhaps more than 90% cleared, and so that's good.
Yeah, it's going to go away. I think what I would, you got this situation been going on for decades, where marine tanker ships were going to all the family islands, and we have never, from all the times I know, based on me being a part of the maritime community, had a spill where a tanker, what we call coastal tanker, or a domestic tanker that operates from one Bahamian island to the next, had a spill to the extent where it became a situation like this. This is the first time that I know of.
Right.
But of course, the ship, the Tropic Breeze that was sunken last year by the yacht Utopia, was the ship that did this run.
Oh, okay.
So now that they don't have the Tropic Breeze, my understanding is they're trying to replace it with a brand new tanker, purpose-built tanker for this purpose, because that company, Marine Tankers, they have a different name now, but they have numerous tankers that go around servicing the Bahamas. They were doing it now for decades. And we could say there were no incidents to any significance where it came to the media. So this is a first off, and again, this is not any of the tankers out of that fleet. This is, I understand, the ship that had the spill was an offshore vessel that went out to the oil rigs and carried supplies, offshore supply boat. And they configured it to be able to carry fuel for discharge as well. So what they did is they got some proper tanks installed in the hull of the ship, and they built a manifold where you can have from each tank a pipeline going to this manifold, and from that manifold you can channel that fuel from the vessel to wherever you want it to go by means of this pipeline. Now, when they first made the ship was really made as a bunker barge or bunker ship, meaning it will go to another ship to give them fuel for them to run. Right? But now you're using a bunker barge to service a land-based fuel depot. Or I understand this is where BC set up to receive fuel from the ship. And so that operation is slightly different from what the ship was doing all along. So again, I would think, and as you indicated before, and as everybody seemed to be, even the owner would have addressed, it's all about that pipeline.
Yeah.
And if that becomes ruptured, obviously, you should have procedures in place so that if there is an incident like that, you could do an emergency stop.
Well, it apparently when they discovered it around 4:30, he said that's exactly what the captain did. He stopped it, shut everything off, but of course it's an ongoing investigation.
Right,
and
right.
We will continue to follow that for sure. Captain
Definitely.
Dane, of course, Maritime Matters, Captain Dane, thank you very, very much for stopping by here on Beyond the Headlines and sharing with us your expertise and insight into oil spills, into the difference of the oil spills, and also the operation of the entire industry. Thank you.
Well, I thank you for the opportunity too, and continue to do a good job on Beyond the Headlines.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Right.
Certainly will. When we come back, the Hot Topics panel is here to bring some perspective to today's biggest stories. We're going to talk to them when we come back right after this break.